audio reports and the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. All right, joining us now for what to expect in D.C. and how that's going to wind up moving the markets here is Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst. Nathan, what Moody's did on Friday at the last credit agency to lower the AAA credit rating for the U.S., what effect, if any, will that have on policymakers?
I don't think it's going to have much of an impact whatsoever with what's going on in terms of this one big, beautiful bill. I think this was somewhat expected from Washington, but I would also say that this is not something that Washington really pays attention to when you're talking about trying to pass a package the president continually wants to get out there. And so this one big, beautiful bill, this north of $5 trillion bill, is one of the three things that are really key to the administration's agenda on economic growth, the other two being tariffs and deregulation. So when Moody's did what they did, I think the Washington response was, yeah, okay, but we're going to just keep going.
So who's paying for this? I think there's some funding gaps here. Could you highlight what's going on there and kind of what the current policy thinking is?
Yeah, so the challenge here is that you're going to have approximately $5 trillion worth of tax cuts, and you have to come up with about $5 trillion worth to pay for it. Now, economic growth will get you somewhat there, but then the challenge has always been, is tariffs going to pay for it, or are there going to be cuts to Medicaid, the Inflation Reduction Act, SNAP benefits, also formerly known as food stamps? And this is where the challenge lies, because for all of the deficit hawks in the House, and this is what we saw play out last night at the House Budget Committee, that says, look, we need steeper Medicaid cuts, maybe cuts that come in and move quicker. There are moderates, on the other hand, saying, look, you can't cut this because if you do, it's going to hurt my constituents. Mm-hmm. So what we're telling our clients right now is that under the Senate rules, and we haven't gotten there, we're still in the House, but eventually when we get to the Senate rules, there is a chance here where they may try and say that these tax cuts are already paid for. We don't have to pay for them again. And so the deficit is going to increase as a result, because it's much easier to vote to borrow today to pay for later than it is to vote to cut a benefit that somebody's going to see happening in the next year or so.
In addition to that, we also see potentially issues in rolling back of some of the IRA provisions. We already saw them rolled back, but now some in the House want even faster dissolvement, there we go, of some of those IRA and clean energy tax credits. Does that actually happen? Because to your point, a lot of those tax credits benefit Republican states.
Yeah, this is something we've been getting client chats about this all morning. And so this is certainly something very topical because, in order the House Budget Committee last night, what they had to agree to, and this is what Speaker Johnson agreed to, is let's take the solar tax credits, for example. They were supposed to phase out in 2031, according to the One Big Beautiful Bill text. But Speaker Johnson reportedly made an agreement that we're going to phase those out by 2028. Now, the House is certainly trying to, these are the deficit hawks saying, look, we need to cut more of the Inflation Reduction Act. But you have Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina sitting in the Senate saying, no, we need to actually do more here. Yeah. And we need to give the IRA more tax brackets, or more tax breaks. So what we're telling our clients is that, look, the House right now is about momentum. They need to get it through the House Rules Committee. They're going to be meeting at 1 a.m. on Wednesday. And then eventually you're going to see a full floor House vote. That's the challenge, or that's the time where we're going to see this really ultimately play out for Speaker Johnson. But at the end of the day, we believe that the Senate is going to strip out and the Senate is going to do whatever they want, and they're going to jam the House. And then ultimately that's going to decide what this bill looks like.
Nathan, I was just mentioning to Alex during the break that, one could argue President Trump is having a heck of a successful second term so far. Does he have enough support in Congress to push through this big, beautiful bill, do you think?
I think so when it comes to the deficit hawks. I mean, obviously, if you talk about the SALT caucus, for those of you in New York and New Jersey, I truly do believe Representative Mike Lawler when he says that he will vote no on this unless he gets relief on SALT, because for him, that's something in a Republican, district in a Democratic state, that's something that really would put his future at risk. But then when you talk about other deficit hawks that are really saying, look, I'm not going to vote for this because it adds to the deficit, if President Trump uses that political capital and says, look, I want you to pass this bill, or are you going to derail my agenda? That's what happened in March with the continuing resolution or this government shutdown fight, and those deficit hawks folded, and ultimately I think that's what's going to happen again, because for Representative Mike Lawler, he most likely would lose his seat if he doesn't vote for SALT. For these deficit hawks, they could probably live to fight another day.
Great stuff, Nathan. We really appreciate it. Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst, joining us there. Let's get to the broader